Y'all made me do this. Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are back to the 2024 Husbando and Waifu brackets, and I was stone cold sober for the last round, but Mama's dipping into the cooking sherry for this one, because we are narrowing down the top 32 nominated Husbando and Waifus from Patreon on my channel down to the Sweet 16, and this round was a bizarre one, not only in how it was set up, but also in the results. So I hope you're ready. I'm not. So with this round, I was trying to think about what to do. I already had the criteria picked out. The criteria for this round were the most physically affectionate and caring husbando and waifus. Now, I say physically affectionate and caring because even if characters are asexual or aromantic, at the end of the day, your husbando and waifu should still be caring and affectionate and should have some kind of physicality in there. Doesn't necessarily have to be sexual or romantic, but it does need to show support and caring. So physically affectionate and caring was the criteria for this round to narrow down to our Sweet 16. So the thing of it is that I didn't want on Patreon for there to just be a random poll. Because what I was afraid of was that the characters, if you have like, let's say, Gojo versus, I'm going to pick a random character, Gojo versus Thorfinn. Physically affectionate and caring, you could probably argue one way or the other, but what I was afraid of was that the character that's most popular would end up winning. And I wanted to try to like shift things up and make them a little bit more complicated and a little bit more to where the people voting didn't necessarily know what the outcome was going to be. And it couldn't be kind of like, I don't want to say rigged, but it couldn't be where people were talking back and forth being like, oh, well, if we vote for this one, I'm sure somebody figured it out. But I'm about to explain my strategy and you're all are going to be like, really? Really, bitch? But here's what I did. So there was a poll on Patreon that was sent out for narrowing down the top 32 to the top 16. But what I did was I said the criteria, most physically affectionate and caring, and I had different rounds of 4 characters, of 4 people from the rounds. I had 4 of them all laid out. And what you had to do was nominate the top 2 most physically and affectionate of the 4. So chances were you're going to be like, who was going to be the most physically affectionate of the round? I didn't want to just do the top one because I'm afraid it would be like really one-sided and hard for people to choose. But if you do top 2, it's a little bit easier and it gives people a little bit more wiggle room. And so what I did was basically went through none of the actual characters that are up against each other were up against each other in the top 4. It's kind of crazy, but I'm going to show you how I broke it down. Okay, so Whiteboard Kun and I, we started forming out this thesis, right? And the thesis was, if we split up every round into groups of 4 and had everyone vote for the top 2, then my hypothesis was the top 2 of each round are going to be the winners of their respective rounds against their competitors. So I set out to challenge that theory, and the results were surprising. So this round, to narrow down the top 32 to the top 16, are not only going to test if the top 2 of each rounds of physical affection and caring were the 2 that would advance, but would theoretically be the 2 that also made the most sense winning their rounds. And you would be very surprised how the husbandos and the waifus were different in this respect. So, to test this hypothesis for this round, let's get started. We're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive into our rainbow-colored Whiteboard Kun, and hopefully this all will make as much sense as it almost did to me. So, in round 1, we had Lan G versus Nicholas Wolfwood. So what I did was I made sure that nobody was in the same category as they were supposed to be in their respective round, right? To make it fair, but also to test that hypothesis. So in Lan G's section, he had 30 of the votes and was in the top 2 of his criteria, which I think is fair. Again, before we dive into this, there are going to be potential mild spoilers for the series, and I will also give a spoiler warning if the character's name is a spoiler before I bring it up. So, Lan G getting 30 in the vote. Nicholas, in his category, got 14. He was the lowest in his round to get the votes for physical caring and affection, and That seems fair. I think that there's a lot of us that try to fanficify certain characters, and we're going to talk about that in this round, where we're like, oh, but Nicholas would be all about Vash, or Nicholas would be all about Millie, he'd be all about Meryl. Yeah, in the fan fiction, but compared to Lan G in the actual canon storyline, I don't think anybody in this entire husbando round, as far as physical affection and caring is going to go, they're going to be pretty hard-pressed to beat Lan G. So I'm surprised he only got 30 votes, and he wasn't the top choice of his round. But the person that beat him, we'll talk about that in just a second. But yeah, so Lan G being more physically affectionate and caring than Wolfwood, that checks out. So him winning that round not only proves that hypothesis, but advances him on to the Sweet 16. Sorry, Wolfwood, maybe next year. The next round we had was Choso. We ended up getting two Jujutsu Kaisen characters pitted against each other, which I'm not opposed. I actually like that because I would hate for all of a certain show's characters to be against one another, to not be against one each other, and then all like be in the top 4 and you'd be like, oh wow, it's just Jujutsu Kaisen characters, no variety, huh? So I'm glad that they get pit together early on, and so that way we can kind of weed out some of the same show, right? That seems only fair, right? So we had Choso versus Yuji, and this one was actually really interesting because Choso got 29 votes, which, you know, was third in his round, but he was only 1 vote behind Lan G. So I thought that that was kind of maybe a popularity decision, but Yuji got, I think, of all the husbandos on this board, Yuji got the most votes for most physically affectionate and caring, and I was like, hell yeah, Yuji, you go, Yuji! Have we seen any canon physical affection and caring of a character with him? I'm only in season 2 of the anime, so I can't speak to that, but I thought it was really good that Yuji won, advancing over Choso. It seemed like a logical choice to me, so I was all about that. So yeah, and he's in the top 2 of that section, so yeah, made sense that Yuji advance on to the Sweet 16. So then we had Sasaki from Sasaki and Miyano versus Armin from Attack on Titan. And here's the thing. Last year with Sasaki versus Lan G, I would argue it was really close between, they actually ended up in a round together last year in the Husbando Waifu bracket, and I was like, oh, this is really close. In this bracket, he won with the most votes towards physical affection and caring, and I think that that is justified and apt. So I was like, of course he would win. That makes sense. And I feel bad for Armin because I think Armin has the potential to be physically affectionate and caring. But again, with exceptions of a couple times that we probably can name canonically, we don't get nearly the amount of physical affection and caring that Sasaki shows in his series. So for that reason, it makes sense that Sasaki advances on to the Sweet 16. Sorry, Armin, but so yeah. Then we have Kakashi from Naruto versus Nanami Kento from Jujutsu Kaisen. I thought this was really cool having two characters that are mentor figures battling it out in the husbando round. I thought that was really cool. But Kakashi, apparently nobody thinks Kakashi is physically affectionate and caring, or he is the least of the 4 because he got the lowest rank, whereas Nanami was second in that round next to Yuji. I love that Nanami and Yuji are the most physically affectionate out of those 4, and they're both Jujutsu Kaisen, you know. So Nanami ends up advancing to the Sweet 16 and proves in this first round our theory that the top 2 of their categories are going to be the ones to advance. So it goes, right? So I thought those rounds, they made sense. So let's go on with our husbandos over here. We had Aki Hayakawa versus a character from Heaven Official's Blessing, whose name will not be disclosed at this time. But yeah, so we had these two characters, and it was actually very justified, I think, without getting into too many spoilers. I feel like Aki's character is more open in their physical affection, whereas this other character, Yin from Heaven Official's Blessing, is not as openly affectionate and caring. They are secretly inside, but not as open as I think Aki was. So I think Aki winning that one was justified and still validates our theory. So next we had Masaki from Tsurune versus Lu Guang from Link Click. This one was kind of, again, you can't really talk about it without getting into spoilers, but I feel like both Masaki and Lu Guang are physically affectionate and caring individuals, but I think that in practice, we maybe have seen more examples. I mean, in Link Click, they gotta touch hands in order to use their powers, right? But not only that, there's a scene in Link Click where Lu Guang like affectionately holds Chang's hand, and it's like, oh yes, there is that physical affection. And I know you Tsurune fans could argue that Masaki has that physical affection and caring within them, but I do think that Lu Guang is justified in winning this category. But man, he by and far in his category, it was like Lu Guang like stomped everybody. I was like, oh, everyone is all about Lu Guang winning this category. So 21-37, yeah, we're gonna have Lu Guang advance to the Sweet 16 and still prove our theory right so far. Then we had, why this matchup was as close as it was, I'm going to call a stunt. I'm going to be Alyssa Edwards here and say I smell a stunt. But Thorfinn from Vinland Saga versus Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, and there was a 5-vote difference. Now, guys. If Sukuna had won this round, I was going to be a little miffed. I was going to be like, no. Again, unless you're just looking at Thorfinn from season 1, I suppose. But even then, well, season 1, Thorfinn and Sukuna, I think, are a little bit more comparable in terms of physical affection and caring. But does Sukuna care about anybody? I guess Fushiguro. I guess, if you're going to go that route, I suppose. But I am glad Thorfinn won this round because that was justified. I was like, yeah, Sukuna is hot. He is a dadification curse, king of curses, but husbando material beyond the physicality, I think it's a little questionable. So I'm glad that Thorfinn advances and proves our hypothesis still correct. Then we had a round that was really, on the surface, I was very sad about, and that was Guts versus Gilbert from Violet Evergarden. I love Guts. And there's a scene in Berserk where Guts is like every partner's dream. Like whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whether you're non-binary, the poetry that Guts speaks in that scene of physicality and pure raw sensual romance is just like, makes you just want to like melt into a puddle. But outside of that, would we say that Guts is as physically affectionate and caring as Gilbert? That's a little bit questionable, and I think it gets a little bit subjective there. And honestly, I think you could maybe perhaps argue either way, but I'm glad that the votes were really close. It was only a 4-point difference. So it was very close, but unfortunately, Gilbert managed to get more votes than Guts in this case, and still proving our hypothesis correct, advances on to the Sweet 16. So as of this point, halfway through the husbando bracket, it would appear as if our theory is correct, and the top 2 of the polls are the ones advancing to the Sweet 16. Seems legit. But then we go down here to our next round, which is Ray from Buddy Daddies versus Tenma from Monster. And I would say that on the surface, you'd probably look at Ray and go, oh, well, he's so quiet and introverted. Would he really show a lot of physical affection and caring? Ray is a cat. Ray is literally a cat. It's going to take him a while to warm up to you, and there's going to be a couple times where he just wants to be like affectionate for 5 minutes, and then he's going to run away. But he's going to be affectionate, and he's going to be caring. And I think a lot of Ray's actions in Buddy Daddies helps to emphasize that physical affectionate and caring. The problem is I think Tenma is capable of that as well. I honestly think that this was a case in which Monster was not as watched. One, Monster was not as watched as Buddy Daddies for the people voting on Patreon. And 2, the people that Tenma were up against, I think, were more competitive in this aspect than the people that Ray were up against. Like Ray, by and large, like won this category in his group pretty easily, him in the second place. But I think that for Tenma, the others he was up against, I think it did hurt it. So even though the hypothesis is still proven correct, do I think it should have been? I think that's questionable. So, and plus, Tenma and Rei have both, Rei's in a hypothetical relationship that is, to me, context, but you can argue it's subtext, but we won't get into that right now. Whereas Tenma has been in a physical relationship with someone. So, if you told me Tenma should have won this round, I would have believed you and backed you all the way. But for the sake of our hypothesis being proven right, we're going to have Rei go on into the Sweet 16. Then we had Shinai from 86 versus our king, our bisexual king, Jean Kirstein. And to me, there's no contest. Jean, physically affectionate and caring. Jean has shown his caring for his comrades numerous times. He has communicated it. He has shown it by talking to others about his affection for other people. He has had visions of his affection with other people. I mean, there's lots of examples. Whereas with Sheen is so mysterious and kind of standoffish about, even being around others, much less show physical affection. I'm not surprised that Jean won this round. And Jean won his category, or rather he tied with someone for his category, whereas Sheen was at the bottom of his category for physical affection. So what can we do? Still like Sheen as a character, but Jean is going to advance to the Sweet 16. Then we had Hanji from Run with the Wind versus Haru Kato from The Millionaire Detective. And I am all for my boy Hanji. Hanji is a physically affectionate person. They are very handsy. They are constantly showing affection, being near others. There's hugs. There's just physicality. Hanji embodies that. And so it was a lot closer than I thought. That Miyano Mamoru effect, I tell you. But I definitely think Hanji deserved the win because of the affection and care he's shown his teammates and, subtextually his top running partner. So, I mean, I do think you could argue Haru has that physical affection within him, but I think Hanji has shown more close examples of it than Haru has. So it makes sense why Hanji is advancing to the Sweet 16, but Haru gave him a good run of his money. That is true. So then we had finally in this set of rounds back to back, we had Sheena from Yano of the Dawn versus my boy Kogami Taiga of Kuroko's Basketball. Look, if you want to talk about physical affection and caring, sometimes punching people also counts as this physical affection. At least in Ace of the Diamond it does. Because in Ace of the Diamond, it's Kagami and Kuroko are getting in fights every 5 minutes, but it's their love language, so you just accept it as a form of caring. And Kagami is such a caring individual, and he's been physically affectionate towards others, and it makes sense that he would win this round. And I love Sheena. But my thing about Sheena is Sheena does get physically affectionate at times, but he's also very quiet, introverted, and kind of standoffish too. He reminds me a little bit more of Sheen in this category. And so I was not surprised that he did not beat Taiga at all. I was no, Taiga deserved to go on to the Sweet 16 faux show. So again, so far, hypothesis proven correct. We're doing all right. Everything's hunky-dory. Then we have our last set of husbando brackets back-to-back. We have Dazai from Bungo Stray Dogs versus Levi Ackerman. And here's where it gets a little interesting because you probably can't see it on the whiteboard, Kun, right now, but Dazai, 17 votes. Levi, 17 votes. They were actually the bottom and second bottom of their categories. Which is interesting because are they bottoms? But what can we say? I this kind of threw a little bit of a wrench in the hypothesis because so far the top two have won their categories and won into the Sweet 16. But with this one, this was kind of the one where it's oh, these were not our winners. So what do we do? So I had to take it over to Patreon to have the philanthropy tier vote for who won between Dazai and Levi. And by a very small margin, Levi took the vote to advance on to the Sweet 16. But that's kind of interesting because Levi was the bottom of his round. And I was ooh, he gets to advance. So at this point, I started to call into question the method a little bit because I thought, okay, he only got 17 votes. I thought for a brief moment about taking the top 16 that just had the most votes, but that didn't seem fair because it wasn't pitting them against a specific rival. And I was like, that's not fair, because then it becomes a battle of whoever gets the most votes could also be tied to which series is the more popular one, and that's what people voted for, and which were left out because people didn't know the characters. So that didn't feel right. So this kind of made me kind of question the system a little bit, but I think overall, if we're talking about being physically affectionate, I don't know. My heart tells me that Levi would be the one to pick, but my brain kind of tells me that Dazai would be the one to pick because Dazai's always talking about being handsy with people, but Dazai's also kind of like more standoffish, I think, than Levi. Levi's a tsundere. Levi just wants you to think he's not physically effective, but he's like grabbing soldiers' hands and he's like pushing himself up against the door to keep Erwin from going, and he's like doing all these things that you're like, well, are you really not caring? But you really are caring. Whereas Dazai comes across as caring, but he actually can be really cold and standoffish. So I think in the long run, Levi was the one to pick, but it's really hard. And if you argued that Dazai was the correct choice, I don't know if I would disagree. So that one was tricky. But then we had a Vash from Vash's Stampede versus Kazuki from Buddy Daddies. And this one was really hard because Vash, by and large, won his category, like 36 votes. Vash was the clear winner to go into the Sweet 16. But I would say, Kazuki, he definitely was the other that was the bottom of the round. He was just above Levi in his category. I really think Kazuki is physically affectionate. Kazuki is all the time like being physically affectionate and caring with people. So I don't know if I agreed with that specific category. Do I think he's more physically affectionate than Vash? No. I think that Vash by and large won that. Vash is like giving people hugs, peace and love every 5 seconds. I think Vash deserved the win, but the fact that Kazuki got so fewer votes than the top two, I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. I think Kazuki deserves a little more recognition for being physically affectionate and caring. So I would honestly argue that maybe Kazuki's even more physically affectionate than Rei, but that's not how the votes worked. So this category really made me rethink the method a little bit, being like, wow, it was proven right up until the last category of the husbandos. And I was like, it's starting to throw a wrench into things. Then we had, by the grace of the deities of the bracket, we had Gojo versus Ghetto from Jujutsu Kaisen. I did not make this up. I saw this bracket pairing. Honestly, this bracket pairing was the reason that this all began. Because I was like, oh, Ghetto versus Gojo. Okay, how are people going to vote? Right? And that's kind of why I wanted to change it up and do something a little different, because I was like, that made me go, well, are they going to vote for this character versus this character for these reasons, or are they going to pay attention to the criteria? So, Ghetto versus Gojo, that's a really hard one because you could really argue it either way, and that gets into some fan fiction territory. What do we do? But it was super close. There was actually only 2 votes that separated Gojo and Ghetto. And you'll see later on that I think it's appropriate that what happens, but Gojo narrowed it out 35-33. And Gojo was the second place of their category, so it fits. But Ghetto was the second place of his category and didn't advance. So I was like, oh, right? We'll talk about that here in a hot second. So this was the first one that proved the theory wrong, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I was like, okay, so the theorem might not be perfect. The last round of husbandos was Kogami from Psychopaths versus Ash Lynx from Banana Fish. And let's be real, guys. Ash Lynx was going to win this. I love Kogami so much. And Kogami is such a great husbando candidate. He kind of is like, he's like Sukuna and Toji and other characters that are just hot. They're just hot. And Kogami has a great, personality to latch onto as a character. Is he husbando material? Sure. In a lot of categories, absolutely. Physically affectionate and caring? Maybe if you're Mikishima. He had a chance with a girl and he left her. So I was very sad to see Kogami lose, but I was really happy to see Ash like advance because Ash deserved that. The irony of it all is that Ash probably would not want physical affection, but AG's not going to let him go without that. So I really wish AG had made the husbando bracket. I really wish he had, but not this year. And I was like, ugh, are you kidding? But yeah, so Ash Lynx advances. Here's the thing. If my hypothesis was to be correct, then the winners, it should have been Gojo and Ash because they were the top two in their category. But it should have been Ghetto and Vash advance. So the fact that Gojo had to face Ghetto, their characters were so popular, they defied my hypothesis. My scientifically driven hypothesis was thrown off by the board of gay yearning. Those two threw off everything. Doing what they do best, wrecking shit and making Akutami laugh in our faces. So I guess that's a win in itself, right? In itself, the pairing of them was so strong it threw off mathematical equations like we would expect. But so our top 16 husbandos that are advancing on into the Sweet 16 are Lan G from Modao Zushi, Sasaki from Sasaki and Miyano, Rei from Buddy Daddies, Haiji from Run with the Wind, Yuji Itadori from Jujutsu Kaisen, Nanami Kinto from Jujutsu Kaisen, Jean Kirstein from Attack on Titan, Kagami Taiga from Kuroko's Basketball, Aki Hayakawa from Chainsaw Man, Thorfinn from Vinland Saga, Lu Guang from Link Click, Gilbert from Violet Evergarden, Levi Ackerman from Attack on Titan, Vash from Vash the Sam from Trigun, Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, and Ash Lynx from Banana Fish. I think that that's a pretty fair top 16. It's a little Jujutsu Kaisen heavy, but Jujutsu Kaisen was a really popular series on the channel this last year, so the fact that the Patreon polls were kind of geared with that in mind, with the people voting, probably is explaining that. So, overall, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we had 8 rounds to narrow down our Sweet 16. And with the exception of the last round, where things were kind of topsy-turvy, I feel like, for the most part, our theorem, our hypothesis was proven correct by the husbandos. And then the waifu bracket happened. And it all went to hell. The waifu bracket, none of this worked out. This was all, I was feeling really good when I was tallying up the results to the husbando poll. I was like, all right, cool. This was a great choice. This was a great idea. And then the waifu bracket came along and I was like, oh, decisions were made. So let's just dive into it, shall we? First, we have Anna, or Nina, from Monster, that ended up going up against Ghetto. And for those of you Ghetto fans that were sad that he didn't make it out of the husbando bracket into the next round, you get your redemption, because Ghetto ends up beating out Nina by 5 votes to make it to the next round. And I honestly, sure. I think that Ghetto is capable of physical affection as much as Nina is from Monster. So looking at that round, I honestly was dreading having to make the decision between the two of them. So you all got to make the decision for me. And I think it's justified. I think you could find ways to say that Nina shows physical affection and caring. Absolutely. And I think you could find ways to say Ghetto does as well. Is there a question of how many canon times we have Ghetto showing physical affection versus Nina that's called into question? Sure. But I think in the overall scheme of things, it works out. I'm not going to contest that choice. So Ghetto is going to make it onto the Sweet 16 of the waifus. Then we had a character from Heaven Official's Blessing versus Maki from Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, again, Jujutsu Kaisen, they ended up in the same round together. They did not get the top 2 in that round. They were the top 3. But the character from Heaven Official's Blessing was Yushi Huang. And then we had Maki from Jujutsu Kaisen. Maki is an entry on this waifu bracket that I feel I am not prepared to talk about. And I say that because I know Maki, because Maki was prevalent throughout a lot of season 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen, and they were prevalent in season 2, but not that much. And I feel like them doing well in this category, I feel like I'm missing something. I'm like, I clearly am missing stuff from the manga that I've not got to yet about Maki's character that I need to know. Now, I don't want y'all to spoil me and tell me your reasoning why. It's just an observation that I've made. I'm like, okay, Maki's doing really well in this poll. For reasons. Now, if you want to talk about stuff from the movie, stuff from season 1 and season 2, in the comments down below, absolutely go for it. But I don't want to know anything from the manga about Maki. Don't want to know anything about her yet. We'll get to that when season 3 happens. Don't worry. But I'm a little bit sad because on the one hand, I think Yushi is capable of being physically affectionate. But then there's a part of me that wonders if that's just like the fanfic side of me that wants Yushi to be affectionate. So she's kind of aloof and mysterious. So Maki winning out, that kind of makes sense. Then here's the thing. The next round is Masato Katsuragi versus Vladilena from 86 and Katsuragi Masato from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Now here's the thing. Does Masato deserve to win over Lena in terms of being physically affectionate and caring? Hell yes. I think Lena could definitely beat out some other contenders in this category that end up advancing. Absolutely. It's just she got the wrong end of the deal and got stuck in a bad bracket against Masato. The thing that got me, though, was Masato wins this round, but she's the last in her category. Y'all, I don't know if you just didn't watch Neon Genesis Evangelion and that was the reason this happened. Masato Katsuragi getting beat by Nina from Monster for physical affection and caring. Are we sure about that? Her getting beat by Yushi Huang for physical affection and caring? Are we sure about that? Now, Mikasa, we're going to talk about that. Sure, we'll talk about that in a second. But for her, for Masato Katsuragi, girl getting it on with Kaji, showing physical affection to Shinji, showing physical affection left and right, and you put her at the bottom of that? I was like, that was the one I was like, oh, I do not agree with that at all. She would be, to me, I feel like her and Mikasa were easily the top 2 of this round, but for her to get last, there were some people not voting. So I'm glad she made it to the Sweet 16, because I was like, if she doesn't make it, that's a robbery, especially for this criteria, for sure. Because again, physical affection doesn't have to be sexual or romantic, but it's showing affection and caring, which Masato has done numerous times in the movies and the rebuilds and the original series. I was like, okay. So I'm glad she advanced to the Sweet 16. I'm sorry, Lena. Lena, if you were up against some other people in this bracket, you would have won. And I wish you had been. So hopefully next year, Lena gets nominated again for the waifus and that whole series of awards, and she makes it. So yeah. Then there was Mikasa Ackerman versus Yor from Spy Family. And what a terrible bracket matchup. A terrible bracket matchup indeed. Masato versus Yor, they're 2 of the strongest contenders, and they get in this entire husbando and waifu bracket. Mikasa and Yor are 2 of the strongest contenders, and they get paired up next to one another. That is so rough. Now, spoiler alert, Yor wins and advances to the Sweet 16 by 2 votes. I was kind of torn on this because if you talk about Yor's character, Yor being physically affectionate and caring, oh, absolutely. I would not argue that at all. I feel like Yor is extremely physically affectionate. She's caring, especially towards her brother, towards our girl, Anya. I'm forgetting that child's name. Towards Anya, towards her brother, even towards Lloyd, obviously. I feel like Yor was a great category winner for this criteria because she just naturally excels at it. Mikasa got the most votes in this bracket, and if you're Eren Yeager, then sure. I feel like, yeah, physically affectionate and caring, absolutely, although you could argue the end result of that physical affection and caring might be a little questionable, but sure. But as far as being physically affectionate and caring to anyone but Eren Yeager, I mean, sure, I guess. Win? I feel like this was a case where Mikasa got a lot of votes as if you were the character she's physically affectionate towards. But for everybody else, no. It's kind of like, I feel like her character would be like if Hua Chong was in this category. If Hua Chong was in the bracket this year and in this category, and you nominated Hua Chong for being the most physically affectionate, I guess Lan G kind of falls into the same category too. Towards their significant lover, oh, hell yeah. Towards everybody else, not a chance. So I guess it makes sense why you would vote for Mikasa, because that's kind of every person in this category. It's just funny that she got the most votes out of everyone there. But again, my hypothesis is proven wrong because I had 3 from this category win out against these. So was it just the luck of the bracket? I don't know. But the waifus, from that point on, things just go kind of downhill from here. So next we have a character from Death Parade whose name I cannot list, and so spoilers for that. It is Chuki. Chuki versus Violet Evergarden. This one was kind of hard too, because I feel like Chuki definitely is physically affectionate. I feel like Chuki, she gets to hug our boy at the end. She shows physical affection. She shows physical affection and caring towards lots of different contestants during Death Parade. So I feel like she was a great category, contestant for this, but she kind of falls into the same problem that Lena does, and that's that you're up against a really strong opponent in that category too. And I know some people would say, well, Violet, is she physically caring and affectionate? She's kind of like robotic through part of her series, but no. Violet is absolutely caring and affectionate. She just shows it in different ways that's not necessarily sexual or romantic, but still can be physical. She may have a robot arm, but girl knows how to use it, right? And she will give you head pats with that robot arm and it'll be fine. So, I don't know. Again, this was a thing where I think the people just hadn't seen the series that these waifus are in, and so they didn't vote for them. Because even though Violet, I think, does deserve to win this round and go on to the Sweet 16, absolutely, the fact that Chuki was at the bottom of her category, I think, is a mistake. Or at least I think she should have got more than 14 votes. Go watch Death Parade. It's really good. And it's not that long, so you don't have to worry about spending a whole amount of time on it. Then we had Suan from Yona of the Dawn versus our girl Akane from Psycho Pass. Akane scrapes out the win in this category, and I think that was justified. I like Suan a lot. He's an amazing character, an amazing waifu and husbando candidate. But Suan being physically affectionate and caring, not truly. I think that there's a little bit of a persona put on there at times, but I think in truth, Suan is a little bit more closed off than Akane is. Akane, I think, definitely is more physically caring and affectionate than Suan, and she demonstrates that throughout what I've seen of Psycho Pass so far. So I think that her winning that category and advancing to the Sweet 16 was justified, but I am sad to see Suan go. So sorry, Suan. Maybe next year. Then we had Reza, Hawkeye from Full Metal Alchemist versus Yasano from Bungo Stray Dogs. And I just felt bad for Yasano because our girl is so good, but damn, Reza and another character from Full Metal Alchemist just dominated this category, which, women writers writing female characters that are affectionate and caring. What? Who knew? So yeah, Reza stomped with 41 points versus Yasano's 20. But I feel bad for Yasano. I think that she could have done well, especially because we've seen her be affectionate, towards Poe, towards other characters. We've seen her whole backstory. We've seen she can be physically affectionate and caring. But Winry Reza just had way too many of the votes. Winry's going to do well here in a second, but Reza by and large advanced to the Sweet 16. There was no denying that nomination to advance. Then we rounded out the category with the most bizarre entry into this bracket, which is Jessica Randy from Banana Fish and Ymir Fritz from Attack on Titan. And it's not that they're bizarre in that they are in this competition, but it's very bizarre that they were up against themselves, Jessica versus Ymir, because I feel like they were kind of on... Here's the thing. I feel like other candidates should have... This is why brackets suck sometimes, because it's just the luck of the draw. I almost wish that Lena from 86 had gone up against Ymir, or that the character from Death Parade could have gone up against Jessica, and we could have seen it maybe a more compelling, like, battle it out. But that's not how brackets work. If you watch March Madness, sometimes some teams get lucked out against other teams, and you're like, man, that team lucked out. And I feel like this was that round where it's like, oh, Jessica versus Ymir. Somebody's going to win. And do they deserve to be in the top 16? I do question that a little bit. Something else that was kind of questionable is that they tied Jessica and Ymir. And I know I just kind of threw shade at Jessica for saying that, she shouldn't, even be qualified for the top 16. But I do think it's unfair that they tied, because I think, honestly, Jessica should have had this. I think she does end up having it, so it's justice served. She ends up having it. She gets the philanthropy tier on Patreon voted for her to win over Ymir Fritz. But even though Ymir Fritz has kids, so does Jessica, right? They both are mothers, so they both have been physically intimate before, clearly. And I think that Ymir does show affection towards her daughters, but so does Jessica towards her son. And I think that throughout Banana Fish, there are just more examples of Jessica not only showing physical affection and caring towards her husband, but also showing physical affection and caring towards other characters like Ash Lynx. Like, she has moments with him, moments with AG, moments where she shows that affection and caring that we don't see with Ymir. Other than Aaron hugging her one time, there's like, she's isolated and not near anybody. So, again, it's just the luck of the bracket, but it feels kind of like Jessica was, to be put in that position, I think Jessica should have got more votes. But this one bracket here with the Death Parade characters, Suan, Reza, and Jessica, I mean, Reza just stomped them all, and they got like the least votes out of the whole waifu bracket entirely, which was crazy to me. But we ended up having the top two from this category move on, and then this one was kind of weird. So Jessica moves on to the Sweet 16, but luck of the brackets. What can we do? Then we move on to the next group, where we had, this matchup was really interesting. It was Hanji Zoe versus Toru Honda, our Attack on Titan, Titan specialist versus Toru, our Fruits Basket girl. Not Oron, but our Fruits Basket girl, Toru. And I think this one's pretty justified. If you've watched Fruits Basket, physical affection and caring is a big plot point of that series. So it only makes sense that the main character of that series wins this category, which is a shame, because I do think that even though I personally think Hanji Zoe is kind of an asexual character, I do think they show some physical affection and caring for other characters, which is great representation. And so I am glad that Hanji made it to this point. I'm kind of sad they didn't make it to the Sweet 16, but I don't think we could have denied Toru their place based on this criteria for this category specifically. I think that was extremely justified. Right? So Toru's going to advance on to the next round. Then we had two Attack on Titan characters up against one another. We had Peak Finger versus Historia Reese. And this one was weird too. I think that you could probably argue either way. I think that Historia makes more sense winning because we've actually seen examples of physical affection with Historia in human form, where unfortunately for Peak, they're stuck in the Cart Titan form for most of their series, so it's kind of harder to see that example of physical affection. However, I will argue that as the series goes on, again, not physical affection in terms of romantic or sexual, but Peak shows a lot of examples of helping like Gabby and helping Falco like overcome loss and being there for those characters that I think could rival Historia, but I'm not going to complain about Historia making it to the Sweet 16. Just sad for Peak. Precisely, Peak. So then we had Winry, Rock Bell from Fullmetal Alchemist, versus Sakuya Chio from Nozaki-kun. Oh, girl. I felt so bad for Chio. I was like, ooh. Because Winry got the most votes out of everybody. Winry was like 42. The Fullmetal Alchemist fans came out in droves for this round. They were like, we're going to make sure Reza and Winry get through no matter what. So Winry got through with 42 points versus Sakuya's 14. Again, I think Sakia probably deserved a few more votes. I think maybe just people in Patreon didn't watch Nozaki-kun, so they didn't vote for her. But also, she spends a lot of her time like pining after a guy that's pretty oblivious, so what can you do? But I definitely think that Chio is capable of showing physical affection and caring, so it was sad that Winry won against her when I think she was deserving of maybe getting some more votes, but she wasn't going to beat Winry, so what can we do? And then we had, this one of the waifus was the one that made me question the system. Like the Levi and Dazai one made me question the system in the husbando bracket. And I was going through the waifus and I was like, okay, I'm feeling like the theory's getting proven wrong, but I feel like these choices are justified. These winners are justified. It's fine. This one hurt, right? Because I think overall, both Misa Amane and Nobara from Jujutsu Kaisen, they both deserve to be Sweet 16 waifus. This was just a cruel hand. This was a really cruel hand. It was a very cruel decision dealt. And the thing about it is, the kind of justice of it is, I think if I had just done a straight up popularity, I think if I had just done a straight up poll and said physical affection and caring, who should win, I think Nobara would have won because she'd been more popular because of Jujutsu Kaisen. But that's kind of the beauty of this poll, this category, because out of the criteria, I definitely think Misa is the winner. Physical affection and caring, Misa may be trying to kill you, but if you're the person she's killing for, let's be real. So I think that even though Nobara, here's the thing, Nobara and Misa are similar. They only have so many seats at their table. And if you are among those seats, they're going to fight tooth and nail and kill for you. But the thing about it is, at the end of the day, I think that Misa would embody the physical affection and caring category more than Nobara, at least what I've seen of the canon material and of both series. I think that would be the case. But it was one of those situations where I was like, Nobara got 31 votes and Misa got 34. And I was like, I want both of them to advance to the Sweet 16, but we can't have nice things. We can't do that. And so that's why we're stuck where we are. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, I love Jessica Randy as a character. I love her immensely. Does she deserve to go on the Sweet 16 more than Nobara? That's why I'm having you all vote this year, so I don't have to make those decisions. Yep, we got 2 more categories to go. So next up we had Irene Adler from Moriarty the Patriot versus Yan Li from Mo Dao Zushi. And this one I think was a pretty straightforward win. Yan Li is definitely, in my opinion, a more physically and affectionate, caring individual than Irene. Not to say that Irene is not in Moriarty the Patriot. She is. But Yan Li just scraped through. Girl making those lotus seed pods, those seeds, making that soup, that friendship soup that brings you together. Bitch is cooking. That is affection, right? And she's physically handing that to you, so that counts, right? Yeah, no. Yan Li definitely deserved to win to advance to Sweet 16. Then we had Cece from Code Geass versus Miwa Kasumi from Jujutsu Kaisen. This one was really close. It was 30-20. Well, no, it was not close. This is almost gone, and that's a problem. Yes. Basically, Miwa had 35 votes over Cece's 23. Again, the Jujutsu Kaisen bias, you can claim it. You can say that's what it is. I don't know. I would argue, again, it's been a long time since I watched Code Geass, and what I remember, Cece capable of physical affection, absolutely. But Miwa is like powdered sugar in human form. Like, girl is so affectionate and caring and kind and considerate. It's like, I feel justified that she won this category. But if you're a Code Geass fan and you're pissed, I feel your wrath, and I'm not saying you're not validated. Then we had one that was very interesting. This one was close. It was Robin from One Piece versus Shinobu from Demon Slayer. And this one was rightfully close. I think it really depends on how hardcore of a One Piece fan you are to have scoured through thousands of episodes and thousands of chapters to find all the examples of Robin being physically affectionate and caring. if Robin had won this, I mean, girl's got hand abilities. Girl's got hand abilities. She's like touching you all over with her affectionate caring. So if you wanted to argue that, sure. But I feel like I wasn't comfortable enough with the level of Demon Slayer I've watched versus the level of One Piece I've read to make a justified and affirmed decision. So I'm glad I didn't have to. I'm glad it was you all. You all chose Shinobu by 2 votes to win this one. I'll take it. If you're a Robin fan, should you be mad? Probably. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles and the way Patreon performs. Then we had our last category of our waifus, and that was Haruhi from Ouran High School Host Club versus Maka Evans from Soul Eater. 2 classic retro anime going back to back. I felt bad for Maka. Out of everybody in both the husbando and waifu brackets, Maka got the least votes. The least. She got less than Ymir Fritz. She got less than Sheen. Nobody thinks Maka is physically caring or affectionate, which is bullshit. She is. She could have got more votes. I felt so bad for Maka. I was like, oh man, really? She was like, by and large, the bottom of her category. And Haruhi getting 25 votes though, and advancing. I mean, I think it's justified. I think it makes sense. I see that. It's just sad for Maka, right? Basically, the gist of the waifu bracket this time around with the top 32 advancing to the top Sweet 16, it was just, I felt for them. I felt for the choices that didn't make because we had a really strong top 32 for the waifus, and we had a strong top 32 for the husbandos. So it's like, there's got to be half that don't make it, and picking those half is hard. So kudos to Patreon for making the decisions for me, because I think a lot of them would have gave me a lot of heartache, and now it's just marginally reduced by your decisions. So our top Sweet 16 waifus advancing on are Masato Katsuragi from Neon Genesis, Ghetto from Jujutsu Kaisen, Maki from Jujutsu Kaisen, Yor from Spy Family, Reza from Fullmetal Alchemist, Jessica Randy from Banana Fish, Violet from Violet Evergarden, Akane from Psycho Pass, Winry from Fullmetal Alchemist, Miwa from Jujutsu Kaisen, Toru Honda from Fruits Basket, Historia from Attack on Titan, Yanli from Modao Zushi, Miwa from Jujutsu Kaisen, Shinobu from Demon Slayer, and Haruhi from Ouran High School Host Club. Jujutsu Kaisen, y'all. I tell you what, our boy Akutami creating some husbando and waifus. But the question is, are all of those husbando and waifus going to advance from the Sweet 16 to the Elite 8? I poured a little bit of liqueur into this coffee for this video this week because I was like, man, this is a lot to go over with you all and a lot to explain. I'm going to need some assistance. Next week, Wine Chan might have to make an appearance because next week is a literal bloodbath. So I hope you're all ready for the pain that's to come next week. So prepare yourself for a Bloody Friday next week as we're going to advance down our Sweet 16 to our Elite 8. Should be a lot of fun. Should be a great time. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. What did you think of this madness? Did it make sense? Are you still confused? Are you still questioning your choices like I am? If so, you can comment down below and let me know if you think that your pick should have advanced to the Sweet 16 or if you think that these are all justified. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back next week with round 3 of the 2024 Husbando and Waifu brackets. Bye!